Today, we're going to talk about photosynthesis. You may be wondering why it's important to learn about this. I'm sure many of you remember learning about photosynthesis in middle school, but today we're going into further detail and debunking common misconceptions you may have. You may be thinking, plants aren't alive, energy comes from soil, or the leaves of a plant take in water. Lucky for you, by the end of this lesson, you will be a plant pro. Check out all of the products that are a result of photosynthesis. Potatoes for French fries, fruit, bread. You're also probably familiar with the idea that plants, such as trees, provide us with oxygen. Without these critical processes, we wouldn't have all of this delicious food, and all the food chains on the earth would be disrupted. Make sure that you have the worksheet that you received yesterday to follow along and refresh your basic understanding of photosynthesis. After this video, we'll be doing a simulation demonstration to further investigate these critical processes.
As you can see, water is flowing up through the xylem, which is located in the roots, where it works its way up to the leaves where chlorophyll are absorbing sunlight energy to use in the production of sugar. Let's take a closer look into what's happening in the leaves. Here we have CO2 entering the leaves through structures called stomata. Stomata are pore-like openings in the underside of the leaf where gas exchange takes place. We can now take an even closer look into the chloroplast of the leaf, where you find chlorophyll. These structures absorb sunlight and convert it into energy that can be used to help the plant. This process takes place by combining water, CO2, and sunlight, which react to form sugars. You can see in this chemical reaction the combination of these things. The leftover oxygen then exits through the stomata, and the sugar created, called glucose, travels through the phloem and to the rest of the plant.
At this point, you should have questions 1 through 5 on your handout answered. If you're still confused, please go back, watch the video again, and get those questions done. Now we're going to look at some real live examples of photosynthesis. Look at number 6 of your handout. Read over the question and think about how you would answer it. In the picture, you can see 2 plants. For our purposes, they're the same type of plant. The lamp is a UV lamp. That means that its rays are similar to the sun, so plants can use those sun rays. Now pause the video and answer the question. Alright, let's look at that. Most of you guys probably intuitively answered A, that the plant closer to the light source would do better. But we're going to look into the photosynthesis reaction to see exactly why this is. Here we can see a simplified version of the reaction for photosynthesis. Rather than using numbers and letters, we're just going to use the words. So, we have water plus carbon dioxide plus light energy from the sun as our reactants. You'll remember this from the animation. The products on the other side of the arrow are glucose, which is sugar or fuel, and oxygen, which we breathe. Now we're going to look back at question 6. So you guys probably answered that A was going to be more successful than plan B. Looking at our reaction, we can see that light energy is required for photosynthesis. So it makes sense to us that B, which is farther away and probably in the dark, wouldn't be as successful. It wouldn't be able to make as many sugars, as much fuel, and plant A would be doing a lot better. Now that we've talked about the relationship between sunlight and photosynthesis, we're going to look at a little simulation. In this simulation, we'll be measuring the rate of photosynthesis in an algae. You can see that's the green plant on the left side of the screen. Algae use photosynthesis just like plants on land do. They're green, and you might remember that means they have chlorophyll in them. But the fun thing about algae is that we can measure photosynthesis by looking at the bubbles. When the algae go through photosynthesis, they produce oxygen and sugar. The oxygen is released in little tiny bubbles in the water. By looking at the bubbles, we can actually watch photosynthesis in real time. There are 2 functions that you're going to look at on this simulation. The first is changing how close the light is to the plant. You can remember back to question 6 and what we talked about with proximity of light and plant photosynthesis. By clicking on the light, you'll be able to drag across the ruler, and make the light farther away or closer. We're just going to arbitrarily start at 150 centimeters. Once you've placed your light where you want it to be, click the Start button in the bottom right-hand corner. You can read over on the left column exactly what it is we're doing, but I'm going to do my best to go through it right now. In the middle of your screen, you can see the bubbles being produced. This is the oxygen that the algae is giving off while it's photosynthesizing. In order to count the bubbles, we're going to go over to this function and use the counter. It's simple. Every time you see a bubble, you hit the +1. In the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a clock. You can use this clock for different trials. Let's say we wanted to discover how many bubbles there were from the 9 position to the 10 position. And I'll reset it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, I went past the 10, but you get the idea. Just pick a amount of time that you want to use. Then for the next trial, change it up. Move the light around. You can move it closer or farther away. For this one, we're moving it a little bit closer. So play around with this at home and come up with a trend that you might see in all your different trials. Now that we've investigated the simulation for the rate of photosynthesis, take a look at the last question on your page. This question is going to require you to come up with a hypothesis or a testable idea. You should probably have a pretty good idea of some trends that you might have witnessed while you were using your simulation.
If you're still struggling with this process, use this as a basic guided review of the steps of photosynthesis. You may also use this as an aid in combination with the simulation to come up with your hypothesis for question number 7. These are relevant standards from NGSS, NSES, and GPS. Thank you, Plant Pros. We'll see you tomorrow.